So today I want to give you an introduction how to interpret boat acceleration graphs. We're going to do that by example of a Rowing in Motion video, which is a video that we recorded using the Rowing in Motion app. We had a smartphone sitting in the boat there that measured the acceleration of the boat and speed and all these parameters, and then wirelessly transferred it to the coach. That's basically me sitting in the motorboat and then using our app to film this video. So what happens there is that the app automatically synchronizes the image from my iPad's video camera to the data that we receive live from the boat. And then the video image and the data is automatically merged together to create one of those videos. So that's really cool to visualize actually what these acceleration graphs mean and which part of the stroke the boat acceleration corresponds to. The first thing to notice is that the boat acceleration graphs always start at the catch. Okay, so the leftmost side there, the negative acceleration there, that's always at the catch. So what we can see in the acceleration graph there is three curves. The blue curve is the acceleration that corresponds to the current image, so that's the current acceleration. The red line is an average that we build over blocks of 5 strokes, so that's basically the average acceleration of the past 5-stroke block. And the green line is the relative velocity of the boat. But that's not too interesting for now, so let's just focus on the boat acceleration. So the boat acceleration graphs that we display in the app always start at the catch. So the leftmost part of the graph here, that's the catch. And we have the drive, the recovery, and then the catch again. So let me just play this video for you so you can take a look. So we see that the boat decelerates as it goes into the catch, then accelerates again into the drive phase, and then shows a nearly flat acceleration, which means the velocity of the boat is constant throughout the recovery. Okay, now let's disseminate a stroke and look at how the boat changes velocity during the stroke. Remember that boat acceleration is the change in velocity. So when we look at the boat acceleration graph, what we can see is actually whether the boat is getting faster or getting slower at this moment. If the acceleration stays at the 0 line, like it does here in the recovery, that means the boat speed is constant. If we look at the green line, which I said is the relative velocity of the stroke, what we can see is that this boat speed changes nearly constant during the recovery. The boat speed is actually the maximum boat speed in the recovery because we have that drive phase over here, so the boat has accelerated throughout the whole drive, and then we basically just let the boat flow during the recovery, which you can see if we go frame by frame here. So yeah, we move through the recovery, the acceleration stays 0, 0. And as we move towards the catch, you can see that the boat suddenly starts decelerating into the catch. And the reason for that is that the boat that the center of mass of the rower basically is moving towards the stern at the catch. And to reverse the motion of the body, the rower needs to push on the stretcher. And by pushing on the stretcher, you're exerting a force in that direction towards the stern. And because there's no force working against that, for example, the force of the blades in the water, because the blades aren't yet in the water, we're approaching the catch. That means that the boat's getting slower in that phase, which you can see because there's negative acceleration here. So what's interesting then is to look at, okay, the blades have entered the water. We're still not quite catching up. The acceleration is still negative. And then we're moving forward until the acceleration hits 0. So what we've done there basically, as we worked our way into the catch, from over here to the start of the next stroke here, is that we slowed down our boat all the way from here to here. So with very good rowers, that's about 350 milliseconds at that stroke rate of 19 to 20. And what that means is that the boat is the slowest at this point, which you can see if we look at the relative velocity over here. So where we can see, okay, the boat has slowed down. And then we are entering the drive phase. In the drive phase, what we can see is that the boat's accelerating. So that means it's getting faster, which you can see by the rising green line as well. So you're seeing, okay, the boat's getting faster. Then somewhere in the middle of the drive, basically just, as you're finishing the leg drive and starting to pull with your upper body and arms, what happens there is that we see the peak acceleration. That is not the peak velocity during the stroke, but it's the point in time where we are exerting the most force in direction of the bow. So that means this is the point where the boat is getting faster, the fastest. All right? And if you think about it, it makes sense, because at that part of the drive, the blades have the most efficient angle towards the water. They're nearly in the orthogonal position. And it's also the position where your muscles are able to exert the most force. So what happens then is that as you move towards, pulling your arms, what we see is that the acceleration starts to drop off. And then after the finish, we have zero acceleration again on the boat, and then preparing for the next recovery. So that's basically how a rowing stroke looks like. So we are entering the catch, the boat is slowing down, blades enter the water, and we have a bit of slip until basically the force that we're exerting on the blades matches the force that we have on the stretcher, and then during the drive starts to exceed it, which means that that we have a positive force in direction of the bow, and the boat is then moving forward again. All right, that's the basic parts of the stroke, and that's basically what happens during a stroke cycle. Before we go into detail about two common technical mistakes people make about the rowing stroke, I want to shortly talk about what actually boat acceleration and boat speed mean and how they interact. So, as I've already explained, boat acceleration is the change in speed of the boat. Now, we need to look at this in the context of what is it that we want to optimize in rowing. And what we want to optimize in rowing is basically the average speed of the boat during the stroke. As I said, the boat constantly changes speed during the stroke, so it's getting slower at the catch. Shortly, just before the blades hit the water and start catching on, the boat is the slowest. Then we have the dry phase, the boat is accelerating, getting faster. Then we have the finish and the extraction of the blades, and the boat is the fastest there. And then we have the recovery phase, which is basically just a little longer than the whole drive phase. So that's a very, very important part of the stroke as well, where the boat might change velocity as well. So what we want to look for really is trying to maximize the time that the boat is fast and traveling fast, and minimize the time where the boat is traveling slow. So that's the whole secret behind getting a higher average speed of the boat. It's really just minimize the time that the boat is slow, maximize the time that the boat is fast, and with that the average speed of the boat will increase as well. What I want to now talk about is two common mistakes that we can see, or that we can very easily spot using the acceleration graph. The first mistake is when we're working towards the catch and we start to slow down our boat too early. So let me just play the video for you. So what we can see is the drop off there, and actually this is an example of very good technique. We can see there is the drop off is very sharp towards the catch. And remember when I talked about how long the duration is from this point in time, so basically where we start to leave the zero acceleration, so where we start to slow the boat down until we start to accelerate again. So that's the metric that we call catch duration. In this example, it's around 350 milliseconds, which is one of the metrics that we can calculate in analytics, and we also display live in the app. But 350 milliseconds at that stroke rate is actually particularly good value for that. And we see lots of rowers with bad technique that start to push on the stretcher early. And what you would see then is basically that this graph here would start to drop off early and drop off slowly, more slowly. So that means you're slowing down the boat earlier and you're slowing down for longer. Not necessarily as intensive, because the price that you need to pay there at the catch is basically, it's a compromise that you need to make. So you definitely need to reverse your motion, and you can either do that by slowly pushing a little on the stretcher, or you can do it by pulling on the stretcher very far into the catch and then do a short but heavy push. And what we found when working with athletes at different levels is one of the biggest differences between athletes that row international level and levels that row club levels is that athletes at the national or international level are able to do short and fast catches. So this is an example of good rowing technique, and if you compare your own stroke to that and see that you're dropping off there, you know that pulling on the stretcher far into the catch is something that you definitely need to improve on. The next common mistake that people make that I want to focus on is what happens at the catch itself. So we previously discussed how to approach the catch and pushing versus pulling on the stretcher. And now I want to discuss what happens once you're actually entering the water with the blades. So in this video, we can see that she does on purpose raise the blades away from the water. You see that? So the result of that is that she misses the ideal point where to start applying force on the handles and accelerating the boat again. And the result of that is a very shallow rise of the boat acceleration at the catch. And remember, we want to minimize the time that the boat is going slow, and at the catch the boat is going slow. So what we want to do is we want to accelerate the boat again as fast as possible at this point of the stroke. So ideally we'd want to see a steep rise of the acceleration graph at the catch. So if we move to slow motion and continue the video, we can see that she starts to improve the way that she hits the water there. You see that? You also saw the small backsplash of the blade. Just pause there. Okay, so we see that there's a small splash. And what this results in basically is that there's a steeper rise, a slightly steeper rise in boat acceleration at the catch. To better illustrate how boat acceleration affects boat speed, let's take a look at an analysis we created in Analytics using two different fore crews. We have two crews here, the crew with the purple line and the crew with the yellow line in the graph, sampled at the same stroke rate, which is about 20. What we can see there, when we start looking at the recovery, is a very similar zero acceleration, which is quite good. But as the two crews approach the catch, we can see that the crew in the yellow boat starts to decrease boat acceleration much earlier than the crew with the purple line. On the other hand, we see that the peak negative acceleration of the crew with the purple line is a bit more negative than the maximum negative acceleration of the crew with the yellow line. If we look at what happens then as the crews start entering the water and start hitting on, we see that the rise of the acceleration graph of the purple crew is a little bit steeper and has a higher first peak. The first peak that you see at about 0.2 seconds into the stroke, followed by a higher acceleration throughout the dry phase. On the other hand, we can see that the crew with the yellow graph has a higher acceleration throughout the rest of the stroke. So you can see as the acceleration drops off towards the finish, that the yellow crew actually has a bit higher acceleration there. If we look at the two graphs based on the two basic assumptions that you want to minimize the time that the boat is going slow and then maximize the time that the boat is going fast, you'd guess that the purple crew is actually the faster of the two. So I hope you enjoyed this little introduction into analyzing boat acceleration. And if you have any questions or want us to take a look at your data, just send us an email and let us know, and we might be able to help you row a little bit faster.